Hi, Susanna, and thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
I read your recent paper, or the paper that came out of your team, on some of the new fitting options that would be available in Oticon Genie 2 together with Oticon Real. And I especially took note of some of the new data logging features, which I thought were really interesting and that will bring new aspects to the fitting and to the counseling process. Can you tell me a little bit more about how they will support me as a clinician? Because I thought that was very interesting and might open up for some new prospects when fitting.
Yes, I would love to. Data logging isn't really something we bring up a whole lot, right? It's been used to log volume control and programs and hours of use. But other than that, we don't really go there a whole lot. And what's new this time is we have added so much value to this part of Genie. And we propose in this paper a new way to use this information in a valuable way with the client. So why did we create this in the first place? Well, as you'll hear in just a second, it's about logging your own voice, conversation activity, and which environments you're in. And this information is so important when we talk about how to be socially engaged, right? So we always like to talk about how hearing health is brain health and how social engagement is good for the brain. And so I think this is a way for us to touch on that in a counseling sense so that we can use information like this to maybe nudge towards more social engagement with hearing aid users.
Wow, that sounds really interesting. But how does this work? What kind of, how does this feature collect all this data?
Yeah, it's divided into two parts, right? So we have an environments tool and we have a conversation activity tool. And they have different input givers. So in the environments tool, we get information from the SNR level and the actual dB level. And this tells us about the complexity of the environment. And we actually use the same detectors we would use for the more sound intelligence processing in the hearing aid. And we use the same kind of icons and way of talking about it as we do when we talk about more sound intelligence. So we have three different environments: simple, moderate, and complex. And we divide this up. How much time do you spend in each, and how much time do you spend in each environment over the course of time? And the other tool is then conversation activity. And the input here is a modulation detector. And the hearing aid will know the difference between the user speaking and someone else speaking. And every time it logs the user saying something, it then brings this information into Genie for the hearing care professional to use.
How does it know that it's the user talking?
It's about the modulation and I think the loudness of it, and it knows the SNR difference in the voice signal of the user versus the environment.
Okay, so you get all this data and you can see it in Genie and you can show it to the user, but in the limited time that you have in daily life with seeing clients, how can this be used in the time together with the user?
I understand that concern because you already have a lot to get done in the clinic, so I wouldn't see this as something extra to do. I would see it as a way to bring some context and help into something you're already doing, which is having a conversation with your user, typically when they come back from their first appointment or maybe down the road, and see how did things go. And we tend to ask these questions anyway, right? So imagine asking that question and then also having some data to support how you ask the curious questions. So if, for example, you see someone has been talking a lot in a very complex environment right at the beginning of their journey with hearing aids. The question might be to ask, okay, I see that your voice is very active in a complex listening situation. Tell me, does this come as a surprise to you? Why do you think that is? So not trying to say to them, this is what's happening, but maybe ask the curious question. And I think one of the interesting things that could come out of it is it might be that they're overcompensating because they can't hear. So they talk a lot when things are tough. That's one behavior we sometimes see, whereas the other behavior would be you don't say much or you step out of the situation because it's too difficult. So two different people doing very different things in the same situation. And I think the hearing care professional has to kind of figure out, well, what's going on here? And once you can do that, you can have a really person-centered approach to how you ask caring, curious questions.
Yeah, so you kind of get a data-based conversation where you can get to talk about these social engagement aspects of wearing the hearing devices.
Yes, and that's what makes it personal. You use data, which isn't personal at all, in a sense to ask a question that might otherwise be difficult to ask because you can't really base it on anything. So it's a support for you to have the conversation.
What inspired this? It sounds amazingly interesting, and I can't wait to try it out. But how did you think of this feature?
Well, some might recall we've actually had an environments logging before, long time ago, and it's been missed. And that's one of the reasons we're bringing it back, but in a more precise, better way. It's also, I think we talk a lot about being able to provide person-centered care, optimal care in the clinic. So I think we, as Oticon, also need to support ways to do that. And so this is one attempt that we have made to make it more systematic and simple in how to provide person-centered care.
So you talk about making it systematic, making it simple. Did you test this out before launching the solution?
Yes, actually, when we design these types of new features in Genie that are supposed to not just be an update, but a different way of working, there's an iterative process. So we have formative tests with HCPs, typically from different countries. We try something out. Actually, these two tools were combined in the first iteration, became too complex, didn't inspire enough conversations, so they were split up into separate tabs. And this made it much easier for the HCPs to understand, like, how do I use this? Another thing we did was we added some tips on how to use it. It might be very difficult to start using a new tool when you're not sure what's supposed to do. So providing those tips and using icons that they already knew for more sound intelligence, bringing them over in a different part of the system. So all of these types of details that make the full feature better. That's the process.
So, final question. In your personal opinion, what is the most valuable benefit of this new feature?
I start to sound like a broken record, but it is being able to provide person-centered care, and I think it's our best, I wouldn't say attempt, it's our best step forward right now in providing data-driven counseling and recommendations. We are kind of moving as not just Oticon, but I think as a society into using data more in everything we do. And we're following this as well in providing this in terms of the clinic. Yeah.
Thank you, Susanna. This was really interesting, and I can't wait to get started using this. And also thank you for this great paper. It's a very recommended read.
Thank you very much.